Hi there, this is Alana Terry, and you're listening to the Successful Writer Podcast, and I am here with Dave Chesson from Kindlepreneur. How's it going, Dave?
Not too bad. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, really glad that you got to join us and chat. We're excited to hear about one of your new offerings for authors with formatting and things, and really just pick your brain about where the publishing industry has been and where it's going. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about both yourself and Kindlepreneur for people who aren't familiar with you?
Sure. Well, I grew up with dyslexia, and so I've never believed myself to be an incredible writer. You go through
Mhm.
school and you struggle the most, and you just kind of label yourself as that person. But later in life, though, that doesn't mean that your desire or dream to write just goes away.
Mhm.
Instead, though, I decided that for someone like me, I wanted to understand a bit more about the market. I can't just sit down and write any book that I want and kind of see results because I'm not Ernest Hemingway. I can't make shoelaces look cool or sound cool or anything like
Right.
that. So for me, I started to look at Amazon. I asked myself, why does it do what it does? Why does Amazon show this book when I search for this? Why is it that they put this button here and that sort of thing? And so for me, this gave me a lot of deep insight into the market as well as to shoppers and their habits. From
Mhm.
there, I started to record this kind of data and I started to create kindlepreneur.com, a website that teaches advanced book marketing. From there, my books have done incredibly well. I've also been a consultant to multiple best-selling authors in the New York Times and to major publishing companies since. And my favorite is that Amazon's even quoted in saying that learn from Kindlepreneur to optimize your books for more sales, which coming from Amazon itself has always been like a real joy. They're not exactly the most
Mhm,
vocal
for
of
sure.
organizations. So,
Right. Especially
and
with people mining their data.
yeah, exactly. Or,
Uh-huh.
the fact is Amazon doesn't directly say how things work.
Right.
And so this has left a lot of people to say, well, how would you know? And I've come from a science background. I was a nuclear engineer. And so I designed all these tests and I
Mhm.
recorded data to be able to show that this is what happens, whether or not that's what Amazon's intending to do, but this is what actually happens. And I think that was one of the biggest things that gave me sort of a unique stance in the marketing world and has been one of the things that has attracted major publishing companies to hiring me to help them in kind of understanding the digital age and the importance of marketing books on stores like Amazon. Even if they don't like Amazon, they still understand they
Yeah.
have to work with them. So that's where I'm at today.
I love that. That's really neat. And what I see what you do and what Kindlepreneur does, it's kind of an intersection of you've got the book side of things, you've got the data side of things, you've got the business side of things, and then interspersed in there, you've got a lot of computer background. So it doesn't surprise me that you've come from such a science background. I was curious about that.
Yeah, it's I wouldn't say I was naturally a science person though.
Right.
I will be the first to tell you that I was not the best nuclear engineer. I enjoy kind of shooting from the hip, and that's not
Uh-huh.
exactly how nuclear engineering should be done. But that
Right.
being said, though, is that I do have a deep root in not just theorizing, but finding ways to test an idea, and then using that information to give concrete, data. There was a lot of people who have speculation and it's led authors down the wrong path. I also like to use the data to make decisions on how to best organize things, such as your book description.
Mhm.
Even the way we lay out a book cover is very important and very strategic. And it's not just from a what looks good or artistic; it's also what connects with the shopper. Just a little blurb into this. I know this is not the focus on what we're talking about, but um, a lot of authors make the mistake of saying, my book is unique and I'm going to make this unique book cover.
Mhm.
That's one of the, I would, if I were to list cardinal sins, that would be one of them. And the reason for
Right.
this is not to cut out an author's, you know, art, because that's what
Right.
we do here. But here's the thing: when shoppers are looking for a book, especially in fiction, they understand what their kind of book looks like. And so they're
Mhm.
using it as a familiar thing, and that they're expecting that, generally speaking, there's going to be a female figure with, who's looking away. And that, and the background shows the kind of genre and the plot and
Right.
all of this, that there's certain colors, there are certain ways you lay out the title. And if they don't see that, they don't connect it with their kind of book, they're going to pass on because they don't
Mhm.
think it is what it is.
Yeah,
I re-
people look for the familiar for sure.
Exactly. And I remember this is best said. I was working with Orson Scott Card, who's actually one of my favorite science fiction writers. So
That's
it's a
cool.
real honor to work with him.
For sure.
And he said, it's funny is that that was one of the first things he learned in the publishing industry. He wrote Ender's Game, which for those of you
Mhm.
who don't know is like an uber famous Hugo and Nebula award winning book. It's phenomenal. It was turned into a movie. He has some thoughts on the movie, but I can't say that here.
Ooh.
But um, he said that when the publisher first came to him with his cover and he looked at it and he goes, well, that's not Ender. And they're like,
Mhm.
it doesn't, no, that you're missing the point. It's not supposed to be.
Right.
And he goes, yeah, but I have no scene in the entire book that shows that. And they're like, yep. But what is that? He goes, well, that's a spaceship, a little spaceship coming out of a big spaceship.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And he was like floored. He was mad. He was like, but we're lying to them. They're
Mm.
thinking that it's the scene. He's
Mhm.
like, no, no, no. All we need people to do is look at that cover and know that it's a sci-fi military book.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I started laughing when he said this because then I told him the story on how I discovered him. And I was like, I think in fourth grade, I was at the library and I got
And
yelled
you
at
wanted
to
a
go.
sci-fi book.
Well, and I got yelled at by the librarian and said, go find a book and you're going to read it
Mm.
by next weekend or you're going to get suspended. Cause yeah, I was a bit of a
Uh-huh.
troublemaker. So I was like, all right, touche.
Uh-huh.
So I go walking over there and I look and I see a book. I was like, oh, this looks like Star Wars. Okay. And I read it and it was like
Mhm.
my all time favorite book. Mad props to that librarian for really creative punishment. But I started
Right.
laughing because I didn't even know what the book was. I just said, ooh,
Mhm.
spaceship. Okay, I'll read that. And that was it.
Right.
And they know publishing companies know this. So just a little blurb and all of that can be backed up with data and heat maps and things like that. And that's generally what we like to do at Kindlepreneur.
It reminds me of the story I heard about the music industry where they started using AI to predict what songs were really going to take off. And so there was this song, I can't remember what it is. I'm not up on pop music, but all the algorithms said it was going to be the best song. And so they really pushed a ton of marketing behind it. And then the radio listeners didn't like it because it was a little bit too outside of the familiar.
Mm,
So what
hmm.
they ended up doing is they played Celine Dion and then they played the song. And like within 2 weeks, the song was up in the charts because it needed something familiar to back it up with. And I think that's what you're telling us with book covers and everything else. It's fine to be original to an extent, but then you need to lock that in and ground it with something that people are going to recognize.
Exactly. Especially for a new author. Like, hey, if you see the name Stephen King, you know what to expect. But when you're an author and there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing associated with your name, I need to know that this is the right kind of book for me. And that's really the major process of online shopping is familiarity and feeling like this is like the kind of thing that you want. That's how shoppers shop. But needless to
Yeah.
say, that's just one of the side things. But I as you can tell, I just absolutely love analyzing the book shopping market, and why
Mm-hmm.
people do what they do and why Amazon responds the way they respond.
Yeah, well, and I love that there are people like you because I'm okay with data to a point, but I'm never going to want to dig into it as deeply as you do or as people at Kalytics do. So I'm glad that that you all exist to kind of parse through that for us.
Yeah, it's and even more so is not just to parse through the data, but then translate it to actionable steps.
So I want to take us on another tangent. You mentioned, one of the cardinal sins being the cover. Do you have any others off the top of your head that you want to jump on if I handed you a
Oh,
soapbox real quick?
sure. One cardinal sin that I would, if I wrote my list of cardinal sins, which that's not a bad article
Not
idea.
a bad article. Well, there you go.
Um, most authors and authors deny they do this, but they all know they do this. They write their book, they go to publish their book, then they get to the part where they write their book description and they throw something down. Like, I mean,
Right,
we're
for
talking like
sure.
spend little to no time on that thing.
Hmm.
The data shows that book descriptions make a huge difference on your conversion rate, and
Yeah.
they should not be that last minute thing. As a matter of fact, I like to work on my book description the day I decide to write the book. And
Hmm.
the way I do that is every time you talk to someone, they're like, oh, what do you write? And they're like,
Mm.
I always start with, instead of saying what I write, I start taking, well, actually, one of the latest books I'm writing on is,
Uh-huh.
and I start telling a book description and I look for their eyes to see whether or not they're hooked or not. So speeding through and creating a book description, super bad cardinal rule.
Mhm.
Another cardinal rule I would say is just guessing at your keywords. When you go to
Right.
select your keywords and just saying, oh, here's a couple of phrases. Look, if you don't know how to best position, if you don't know how to best describe your book to help Amazon show your book to shoppers, from
Hmm.
day one, Amazon's not going to help you to send anybody to your book. And your
Right.
entire book launch is going to be dependent on the efforts you did to grab people and bring them to your book instead of letting Amazon naturally bring people to your book. So do
Mhm.
not show up to your keyword section and just start writing anything.
Yeah. I love that. How often do you think you would recommend that authors look at their keywords? Because maybe somebody did research 2.5 years ago and got great keywords back then.
Mhm.
Is there, you have a good feel for the Amazon algorithms and how quickly things change? How often do you think it is, or is it important to look back at old keywords?
Yeah, I actually wrote an article on exactly this, and it's how to change your Kindle keywords. And if you type that into
Hmm.
Google, you'll be able to get a more step-by-step process on it. But a general gist is this, is that when you do change your keywords, about within 24 hours, Amazon responds. And the truth of the matter is majority of authors that even when they do it, they'll see a bump in sales. Like it's kind of weird. It's
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
now, granted, if you're not doing it right, you'll see a bump in sales and then it goes back to nothing or
Right.
wherever it was.
Hmm.
Um, you know, in the but that being said, if you approach changing your keywords in a systematic way, you may discover something really cool. What I like to do is I change 2 boxes at a time and I monitor my sales for the
Hmm.
next 3 to 4 days. And I see if actually, you might see a bump,
Yeah.
but then I like to see where it settles at. You may
Hmm.
see that it bumps and then it settles at a much better. Sweet. Hey, one of those 2 boxes really helped you.
Right.
Then you go to another 2 boxes and you just kind of keep doing that. And you cycle through. If you notice that it drops, then hey, put the old ones back in because clearly those were doing something for you, which is awesome to know, by the way, especially if you write in series. I mean, if you write
Hmm.
the first book in a series and you see that that keyword was really helpful,
Right.
reuse that
Use
one.
it throughout. Right.
Exactly. So I like to use that process to kind of discover, but we have definitely noticed that when you do change your 7 Kindle keywords, there is an immediate response. Sometimes not, but it's a real quick thing. So yeah, if you have dead book sales, that's one way to do it.
Mhm.
I'm actually writing a full article on what to do if your book sales die.
Great.
Say you wrote a really good book, but the problem is that when you did your entire promotion, everything was fine, and then over time it just petered out. There are
Mhm.
some steps that authors can take to really pump that back up and get it in front. And one of those steps is changing your keywords.
Wonderful. Love that. So I've got a funny story I'll start with before my next question. So we went to visit my grandparents, and my grandpa was celebrating his 98th birthday, and my
Oh
kids were
wow,
there with us.
nice.
And so I asked him while the kids are there, I said, Grandpa, you've lived through so many amazing things in history and have seen so much change. What would you say is like the thing that's responsible in your lifetime for the biggest change in history or society or culture? And he just laughed. He said, "Oh, the technology." Like, he's a man of very few words. I'm like, Grandpa, that doesn't help us. So if I were to ask you, like, looking back over the, how long's Kindle been around? Maybe 12 years or so.
Yeah.
If you were to look back, what would you say are maybe like the top, I don't know, 2 to 4 bird's eye view changes, and kind of what can that teach us if we look at the changes that have already happened? Do you have some projections about what authors can be ready for in the future?
Well, that's a good question. I think one of the things that was surprising or very beneficial to authors was when Amazon created Amazon ads.
Mhm. Sure.
This was a direct way for you to basically say, hey, Amazon, I really want you to show me here, and I'm willing to pay you for every person you convince to not only see it, but click on it.
Right.
That's a lot of power that was given to authors. I mean, before it was kind of like the whole hope that you do things right and make
Exactly.
sure
Yeah.
that you show up, and do a
And
rain
you
dance and hope that Amazon notices you or something like
and you
that.
hope for a book club feature deal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
You cross your fingers, you wear your lucky socks and all that. But this was the first
Exactly.
time that we were able to gain control. The other thing that I really like about Amazon ads is that once you set them up and you're working them, you're empowering your book to have constant sales. Okay.
Right.
And consistent sales is one way to is actually, this is a big part of that article I was talking about, but consistent
Mhm.
sales is another way to keep your book alive in Amazon's eyes. The moment that they stop seeing sales coming in is the moment they stop showing you. Amazon's all about showing the right product to the right customer, and if customers
Mhm.
aren't purchasing it, then clearly this is not the right product anymore.
Right.
Whereas keeping that increases what I'm calling the popularity effect, which gets Amazon to keep showing you. So I think Amazon ads was a very big one. It also helped me to understand a bit more what's going on, because through Amazon ads, I can see that, numbers that I like, hey,
Mm,
Amazon showed my book 100,000 times, but only 2 people clicked on it.
mhm.
Interesting. Like, now I know that
Right.
100,000 people saw my book cover, and only 2 stopped what they were doing to even like click on it. Like, okay, that's good information.
Mhm.
Or I had 1,000 people click on my book, but only 2 people bought it. Clearly, I'm not
Right.
convincing them to buy the book, aka my book description really needs a big change. That needs to be improved. That's also how I discovered how important book descriptions was when I
Right.
saw the numbers. I
Mhm.
literally changed the book description on one and tripled the conversion rate overnight. It was like, wow. I was
Yeah.
now 3 times more people were buying that came to the book page than before. And that made my email marketing that more effective. That
Mhm.
made my Facebook ads that much more effective. That
Right.
made all the other efforts that much more effective. And I just used to think, not do people really read the full book description? And
Uh-huh.
it turns out they do.
Exactly. Yeah. No, Amazon ads were a big game changer for me too. That's kind of how my writing took off. I think I had already had, a dozen books at that point, but I was publishing the same number of books every year and my income was just flatlined for a
Yeah.
while. And then Amazon ads came around and I didn't have to do the rain dance and hope for book club feature deals and that kind of thing.
Right. Before, I used to look at online book marketing as kind of like a balloon with a hole in it. Okay.
Mhm.
Where if you huff and puff, you'll keep that balloon up. But the
Yeah.
moment you stop huffing and puffing, the moment it just
Mhm.
deflates. And
Right.
so a lot of authors got themselves in the situation where they were spending more time on marketing a book than writing the next book. And not many authors really want to be in that situation. Whereas
Mhm.
Amazon ads was a very good way to keep the balloon pumped up over
Right.
time for consistent sales, so that you can then build out your arsenal, if you will, or your assets, aka your books,
Mhm.
so that you're doubling, tripling your income rate instead of, you know, juggling multiple balls in
Yeah,
the air. And
doing more and more work to keep your sales about the same. That's
yep,
a frustrating place to be, and a lot of authors are in kind of that treadmill of you're working and working and working, and you're not getting any farther. You're just staying at that kind of plateau.
exactly.
Yeah. What would be some of the other, looking back, big shifts in the ebook world?
Well, I mean, the ebook, I wouldn't say there are a lot of big shifts. There's always
Mhm.
been some changes, subtle changes that Amazon's done here and there. But in truth, the the market itself is, and a lot of people might disagree with me, but the market itself is pretty consistent.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have new technology like Amazon ads.
Right.
Sometimes you have new software that comes out like Rocket that gives more
Mhm.
insight. Sometimes you have, experts that create really good courses that help to figure out these systems.
Yeah.
But all in all, Amazon does slight tweaks. I mean, if you think about it, that particular book market does not want to change that quickly because things are going good. Amazon
Mhm.
likes to make calculated small adjustments. They used to show all the categories that a book was a part of, then they deemed that was a waste of space, and so now they only show 3. They used
Mhm.
to show the entire category string, then they were like, that's a waste of space, nobody's using that, let's just show the category name. you
Yeah.
know um just little tiny things like that, but it takes months before they roll them out. So
Yeah, when I talk to authors about Facebook ads, some of them really wants to send people to their own website. And that's always my answer. Amazon has done so much more testing about what makes a sales page convert really well. You're never going to out convert an Amazon sales page.
right, I once read that they spent millions of dollars just to figure out the right button color for the checkout page.
I'm
you
not
know
surprised.
and so clearly that's a good
Yeah.
color to use, maybe.
Most authors aren't gonna pump $1 million into a button on their website.
No, but that's the thing is that they're always trying to find ways to convert. I mean, if they can increase their conversion rate by 0.01%, we're talking
Mhm.
millions of millions of
For
dollars
sure.
more.
Yeah.
So they're clearly going to do that. So
Yeah. Well, I follow your email newsletter, and I believe it was one of them where you were talking about think it must have been Amazon ads. This is a while back, so you can correct me if I'm getting it wrong. But what you said, it really stood out. Amazon's going to do what's best for Amazon, and in
Yeah.
terms of what kind of changes they roll out, and a lot of authors think of Amazon as the enemy, but then again, Amazon's paying the bills, it's paying the rent, it's So I like to look at it more of a Amazon's going to do what's best for Amazon, and if that means that I'm going to sell more books, let's jump on that and do it.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is that Amazon cares most about their customers. We
Mm-hmm.
authors are a product. Our books are a
Yep.
product.
Yep.
Amazon wants to make their customers happy, and sometimes that's to the chagrin of the authors. Sometimes it's not as beneficial to us,
Right.
and that's just kind of the world you have to kind of play within. Uh, but as an Amazon shopper, I've appreciated a lot of their moves. So,
Exactly. Yep, exactly. Well, looking forward now with all of the trends that you've seen and you've been around and you've got a really good pulse on the industry, what kinds of expectations do you think if an author wants to be really well set up in the next 1 to 3 years to kind of stay on top of what the market's doing? Do you have any projections about changes coming or ways that we can be prepared for whatever's around the corner?
no, but I am going to give a recommendation, and it wasn't a cardinal rule per se, but it is one of my favorite recommendations to authors, and that's start your email list as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you haven't published your book yet, set up your email list. And I regret, I hate email. My team knows that. Like, I dislike email with a passion.
Uh-huh.
You have no idea how much anxiety, even years of writing them, I get over writing one email. So,
Uh-huh.
needless to say, I wasted lots of years of not doing email. I
Mm-hmm.
can't tell you how important and how much money the email list has made over the years. It makes marketing your next book that much easier because
For
your
sure.
first book, maybe it only got 100 people to sign up, but guess what? Those are 100 people that not only purchased your book, but they then read it and then they were like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I want more from this person. They're phenomenal. But then the second book comes out. Maybe you get now 300. Now you've got 400 total. Then the
Yeah.
third book, and it just keeps stacking. What's really awesome about this is the bigger you make that, the more engaged that you keep it, uh, just the easier book marketing gets.
For
You still don't
sure.
have to be
Mm-hmm.
famous. You don't have to be, having giant lines of people coming to sign your book.
Mm-hmm.
You just send out an email and it just, there's
It
more and
just
more that
happens.
comes. It just happens. So
Right.
if if you believe that you're going to write more than one book, then 100% set up your email list. And I would even say to authors too, to go one step further and think of a very great way to convince people to come over and join your email list. Uh, do not write a random short story and put it on there. Nobody cares.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, one of my biggest recommendations is to write a short story that connects to the book they just read. All right. If it's fiction, write a
Mm-hmm.
prelude, a post-credit scene. I mean,
Yeah.
let's face it, post-credit scenes are like one of my favorite parts of watching a movie. So why not create a post-credit scene or an inside or a side story that's like an inside joke that the characters know, but you
Mm-hmm.
don't know yet.
Right.
Um, I'm going to be way more likely to not only sign up for your email list, but then read the thing you have. Now I've
Right.
read two of your stuff. I'm much closer to being a super
Mm-hmm.
fan than I was at just one.
That's a
And
really good
so
point.
I think that that's a really important step. And if you do that, that's great. If you're a nonfiction, think of very useful ways to do things. I personally love the idea of setting up a free course,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, call it a companion course, and you can record and put it on something like Thinkific where you can set that up for free. And then in order for people to get access to the companion course, they just have to sign up with their email. What's awesome is that that's a phenomenal marketing effort because now you can put on the cover of the book free companion course, but you can
Right.
put it in the book description. And so now if I'm looking between your book and somebody else's
Mm-hmm.
is just a book, but yours is a book and a course,
Yeah.
major value. I'm going with that one. And so now you increase your conversion rate, you increase the conversion rate of people who sign up for your email list, you have
Mm-hmm.
people listening and learning from you. That's just an incredible way, and your email list will grow dramatically.
For sure. Do you have strong opinions on the debate about organic versus doing big promotions to grow your list?
I think that both
Mm-hmm.
go hand in hand. I I have an article that I wrote, but I haven't published yet, called The Popularity Effect. And I did an analysis of looking at what happens when you do a big promotion and you have either free sales, free downloads, or what happens when you do a promotion site or a BookBub deal or something like that, and how that affects Amazon and how they rank you. And what I found was is that the more popular you show your book through some other effort, whether it's
Hmm.
ads, whether it's an email list, whether it's a promotion, whatever, Amazon indexes your book for more keywords, and
Mm.
then they start analyzing to see how well you do. And if you show consistent sales at that point, then they just kind of keep increasing the keywords that you rank for automatically until you hit a point where you're like at the point of no return. They have their own way, and
Hmm.
so I have all this data that shows that a promotion can help with organics. Um, and organics is always just a great thing. So because
Right.
organics is while you're writing the next book, your other book, your previous book is making
Hmm.
sales.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's great. Well, let's shift gears a touch. You've talked a lot about all the articles you've got. I've mentioned just how useful your newsletter is. So can you let people know, if they're not kind of in your ecosystem of trainings for authors, some of the ways that they could kind of get into your audience and have all of this wonderful data at their disposal?
Sure. Well, you can either go to kindlepreneur.com and there's a sign up right there at the top. Or if you Google book description generator, I have this free tool that allows an author to build beautiful book descriptions. There's a
Hmm.
lot of like things you can do to a book description on Amazon, HTML coding, and make it look really awesome.
Hmm.
Um, this tool makes it super easy. You write your book description, you highlight things, you click, and what you see right there is exactly what it's going to look like on Amazon. When you got it looking the way you want, click get my code. That's absolutely free. You don't have to sign up for that. And you just copy that code and paste it right in Amazon, and your book description looks the way you saw it. That being said, though, right there on the tool, I have a sign up where you can sign up for my book description formula. It's a
Oh, cool.
free PDF. It's one of my favorite PDFs I ever created that breaks down the structure to the perfect nonfiction and the perfect fiction book description. And I highly recommend checking that out. That will really, really help you with those conversions we talked about.
Wonderful. What's going to be your advice for the author who just hates anything that even resembles being formulaic, but still want to make good sales?
Well, like we talked about with the book covers,
Hmm.
um, it's not so much about, like it's super rare to be super unique and have
Yeah.
that have a great effect on the market that doesn't know
Hmm.
you.
Yep.
Um, Whereas there are proven things through data and through historical information that shows that this converts the best when you do these sorts of things. Now, this isn't to say that, it has the exact sentences you need to use, but what it does is it helps as a guideline show you how you should put together your book description. Case in point, most of the book descriptions that I read like book reports.
Right. Yeah. It's just a
And
synopsis.
right, here's the synopsis with lots of information. And by the end of it, I'm like, okay,
Hmm.
well, why read the book? I
Yeah.
basically have read
I got the
75% of it.
Cliff
I know it's
Notes.
coming.
Yep.
Instead, authors need to think of them almost like a movie trailer. Let's face
Mm,
the movie trailers that don't give away the ending. There's been a
right.
couple of those bad boys, but most of the time they set the tone and then they introduce one character, and that they show things and they ramp it up with,
Hmm.
big explosions or big movements. Like they're selecting the right scenes to show someone. And we with our book descriptions need to hook them at the beginning. We need to make them feel that this is their kind of book that they're looking for. We do not need to overload them with information. I say never introduce more than two characters. Try to hit
Yeah,
just
that's a good
one.
advice. Yeah.
I've read too many where by the time I'm done with the paragraph, I forgot who the main character is, and that's a
Yeah.
problem.
Hmm.
And then end with a strong statement that concludes. And nonfiction has their own as well. These things are really strong guidelines to help you form the right kind of book description that will connect with your audience.
Awesome. Yeah. I love that like I said, your resources are so useful and there's so much free information that you're giving to us. And a lot of us are relying on you to let us know what's coming up, because not all of us dive into the data like you do. So I really appreciate what you do and how generous you are in sharing all that
Well, thank you.
information. And then, yeah, you've got some great software too. I know you had mentioned it once, but for anybody who's not familiar, I've been using the Publisher Rocket probably since like 2017, 18, when I started Amazon ads. So it does a lot of things. What I use it for is finding keywords for my Amazon ads, but it helps with categories. It helps with what's the elevator? Because like I said, I just use it for the AMS keywords, but I know it does quite a few other things.
Yeah, well, when selecting your 7 Kindle keyword phrases, it not only tells you what people type into Amazon, it also tells you how many people per month type it in. So it can really help you
Nice.
with your organic discoverability. With regards to categories, there's over 14,000 Amazon categories, and there's nowhere where Amazon actually shows you those categories. We
Right.
do. We have the list of all of them. And for those thinking, well, when I go to publish my book, though, don't they have that list that pops up? Those are actually BISACs. And
Mm-hmm.
we won't go down that detail, but BISACs are like a standard code.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only 4,700 of them. So 4,700 is what most authors get put into, but there's
Right.
14,000 categories on Amazon. And with that, on Publisher Rocket, you can see all 14,000. We'll help you exactly select the right ones. And then on top of that, we even tell you how many books a day you would need to sell in order to be the new #1 bestseller in that category.
Oh,
So
nice.
combine those things together, you're going to have a really powerful way to select your 10 categories. And by the way, you can select 10, and we have a how-to step to get Amazon to put you in all 10. So there's that component. We also help you to analyze other books so you can see how much money they're making, how they're doing, where they are. And we've got a whole bunch of new features coming out. And anybody who buys Rocket, as you've seen, always gets updates and new features free.
Yeah. Well, and I also love, so many things for authors. It's software with recurring fees. And like you add all those
Oh,
up and
yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, sure. I'll sign up for $10 a month. I'll sign up for $20 a month. So I love that you're giving us things for you pay for it once for a
Yep.
really decent price, and then you don't have to worry again.
Exactly. Just one time, $97. That's it. You get unlimited updates, new features, you name
Mhm.
it. And like I said, if you were around from like 2017, you've seen a lot of changes over
A lot of
time. And
updates. Yeah.
we're just always
Name
looking for ways to
changes
improve.
and yeah, no, it's been great. And you've got more software that just came out for formatting your ebooks. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So kind of my starter point is that when I first started writing, I used Scrivener. That was like
Hmm.
2007, back when like it first came out.
Yeah.
And my take on Scrivener is it really helps with writing. But even over 14 years of using it, I've never actually figured out how to really use it. And I've
Right.
I've paid for courses before.
Hmm.
Joe Nicoletti's Learn Scrivener Fast and a couple of Udemy courses. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I totally forget how to do the thing I just watched. Like I feel like you have to study, like it's a
Uh-huh.
test to figure out,
Steep
oh,
learning
that's how
curve, I've
you.
heard. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. And so the other thing is that Scrivener has a way to format books, but there's even courses on how to use it to format, and it's not intuitive
Hmm.
nor is it easy.
Yeah.
So we as authors, especially if you're using Scrivener, you use Scrivener, then you have to export to Word document. Okay. Then you go back and forth with your editor with Word document. Okay. Or
Uh-huh.
if you're lucky and you got one that will accept Google Docs, that's cool because then you don't have to go back and forth.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
it's not as good as Word. So then you got
Right.
that problem. Then when you're finally done, you have to upload it to some formatting software. Okay.
Yeah.
The most popular of all is Vellum, which only works on Mac. So PC users, you got to either get a Mac or you have to do Google or Mac Cloud and then somehow connect
Hmm.
it, through a
Yep.
bridge. And it's
Yeah.
really painful. And it's a very expensive software. The point though is that for the author, we already listed a lot, and I'm not even including outlining software or anything.
Yeah.
You have to
Hmm.
use a lot of different software, or you're kind of piecing things together to kind of make it work. And for me, that's always been a problem, especially by the end of it. I have like 7 or 8 files on my computer that say final document,
Oh, I
final,
know.
final, final edit. No, this is the final.
Yep.
This is the one that the editor approved.
Uh-huh.
Um, you know, and then I've actually in the past formatted and published the wrong version because
Oh
I
no.
forgot. Yep, it was not the final final. This is the final, whatever it said.
Right.
It turns out that was the final that I wrote, not got edited. So the entire editing. So I actually had to pay for a formatter to reformat, which cost me. That was a very expensive mistake on my part, and I was not happy about
Hmm.
that. Um, And so for me, I've always wondered, is there a way to create one that combines them all? Okay.
Hmm.
And so this is where Atticus.io was created. Now, as a software, it's very hard to build a Scrivener and a Google Doc and a Vellum all in one.
Right.
And
Right.
by the way, my goal is to make it where, and I always tell people, if Scrivener, Google Doc, and Vellum got together and had a baby, this is what we're
That's
creating.
what it would be.
Exactly. That's exactly what we're doing. But what we're starting off with is that we're first starting with formatting and writing. Okay. And so, what makes Vellum so loved by the author community, we've made that. We've made that
Hmm.
happen, except we're also adding more customizations and capabilities because one of the things that a lot of people complain about with Vellum is you can always tell a Vellum book because they all look the same.
Right. Right.
Um, we're working with a whole bunch of companies, BookBrush and Draft to Digital, like so you can easily work with companies you like.
Nice.
Um, but yeah, but imagine right now what we have is Vellum, but cheaper, works on Mac, PC, Linux, all of it,
Uh-huh.
and $100, cheaper than them. And so we're starting with that, and you can absolutely write your books on it. But soon we're going to have like analytics, gamification, character
Cool.
cards, setting cards. So you're going to start to see those components that make Scrivener look great, except easier to understand. I always
Right.
tell my development team, I'm like, hey, how many brain calories does somebody have to spend to figure that out?
Hmm.
And I'm like, too
Hmm.
many. So
Right.
figure out how we get rid of that,
Get
And
it
so we're
simpler. Wonderful.
exactly. And then finally, the big thing that I'm really excited about is online collaboration. So imagine that here you are using your Scrivener, but you can collaborate with another author. In this
Yeah.
case, you and the other author can write at the same exact time. The other thing is that we want collaboration with editors. So say instead of having to export to Word and go back and forth, or make
Hmm.
an editor by Atticus, what you
Right.
can do is you can send them a link. And when they open that, it will have them open up a free editor version online.
Cool.
And it will literally look and act just like Word document on editing. Because I've also learned too that editors don't like to learn new things.
Learning
And
new
so
stuff.
they have
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
way.
That's wonderful.
So they open up, they can do exactly like Word doc, and you can accept their changes from your Atticus, and immediately it gets applied. So, like I said, that's pretty much it. It is Scrivener, Google Docs, and Vellum got together and had a baby.
And named it after my favorite literary dad. So extra point for that.
Ah, Atticus Finch. Yes. That was a little fun fact on that. I too love Atticus.
Uh-huh.
And when I started doing my research to kind of understand how many Atticuses there were, because let's face it, you don't ever want to brand
Right.
something and then find out, well,
Yeah.
actually, it's good here, but
Right.
it's bad there.
Right. Right. Right.
What we found was, and this was like the thing that totally made me fall in love with it, was that Titus Atticus was one of the first ever publishers for the Roman Empire. And
Interesting.
he saved the letters of Cicero and published them. And he saved a whole bunch of things from like Aristotle and others. And so I was like, wow. So the two people I run into is an awesome
Hmm.
American character in
Yeah.
the literary works
Yep.
and one of the first
And a publisher.
legit publishers. Huh. Done.
That's
So
perfect. I
that's
love
what we
it.
went for.
Well, yeah, it sounds great. And again, I just want to thank you for sharing so much of your wealth of insight with all of us who aren't as huge data heads as you are. And thank you for spending time with us today.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me.
All right. Talk to you soon.